We found ourselves creating even more events online, bringing in more recruiters and having really specific themed conversations with those recruiters to engage specific students or connecting them with specific student clubs and orgs and programs on campus so that the conversations were a little more intentional, but recording them as well so that we could have this library of content so students who weren't able to attend, whether it was because they were in a different time zone or were in class or whatever it could have been, or just because they might be too shy to attend the events, could still access this information and get what they may need to further their conversations and just career path.
We've been doing video interviews for years, actually, about 6 or 7 years, here in Atlanta Public Schools, because we interview people from across the country. So it was just really helpful for us. But we still became even more flexible over the past year, especially around pushing the concept of group interviews more. While we've been doing that for years and encouraging it as a best practice, you still have pockets of the organization where the hiring manager sat down with a person one-on-one and made a hiring decision. And so by forcing them to go virtual, it enabled them to do panels, and we kind of forced it in the pandemic as part of our virtual interview, rollout and instructions. And I think it's given us better quality interviews. We're able to include a more diverse range of panelists from across the organization, both in ethnicity diversity and role diversity, because before you had a lot of time constraints with being able to pull interviewers out of school buildings, bring them down to district office, or compile a diverse group of people, relied a lot on scheduling and travel across the city. But with the virtual interviews, they can sit in an interview, then go observe in a classroom, then go handle that parent meeting, then come back in the interview.
In the past couple of years, we've really focused on building out our diversity and inclusion function as an organization. And we started by doing that a couple of years ago by actually hiring a dedicated director of diversity and inclusion. And through her work and bringing the senior leaders along with that, last year we released our first diversity and inclusion annual report. And so we released that information both internally within the organization, but also publicly for our customers and anyone who visits our website. What that report entailed was setting goals for the organization. It was sharing our current metrics around diversity and inclusion and concrete actions that we're committing to in order to achieve those goals.
If your senior leadership team, your principals, your hiring managers all look a certain way, it can make candidates feel like they have to look the same way or try to look that way, in a job interview. And so, one of the things we've done here in Atlanta is we have a team of 50 teachers that works on our recruitment team. They do it as extra duties for a stipend, and that's our candidates' first experience with the district. So they're going through those top candidates, and they are reaching out to them and calling them and talking with them, and that's often our candidates' first experience with the district, and they're able to expose candidates to what our real culture is like before their interview. We're also very intentional about our social media presence and our website design. We include pictures of teachers with pink hair, tattoos, dressed up, dressed down, dressed in cultural attire, so that, all kinds of candidates can see themselves being able to interview with us. I actually received such a cool piece of feedback last week from someone I was interviewing for a job on my team who said, I usually change my hair for job interviews, but I wore my natural hair today because I've heard, or I feel like that's a thing you can do in your district. And that was one of the biggest compliments you can receive, is that candidates feel comfortable bringing their whole selves to your interview process.
The flexibility that especially our millennials really want, it doesn't exist in the teaching profession right now. It just doesn't exist. And that idea of building a team, what we've seen with our school partners here locally is that when there's a team of educators, I see this trend that happens early on. Teams almost always, when somebody's going to be out, will try to bring in a sub. And then they're like, but we didn't really need the sub. And the sub's not really quite sure what's happening anyway because the structure is different. And there becomes this fluidity that doesn't exist in other more traditional one teacher, one classroom environments. And that flexibility is something that I think candidates really, really want. And it's hard for us to be able to genuinely offer that right now. So, building teams gives us space to think differently about what it means to be an educator.
You expressed what your interests are. Now we've identified some organizations. Now let's do the research on who these companies really are. Because if you're going to spend 40 to 50 hours a week of your life here, does it align with your values? Will you be fed there? Will you be happy there? So it can't just be start with researching the website, but now I give them homework assignments. Now go find 3 to 4 people that work within the organization, whether an alum or just the recruiter or any professional in a position you may be interested in, and have an informational interview and ask them, what's the culture like there? What keeps you there? What's your day-to-day? Because we think we know what people do, but we don't. So let's have these conversations and learn from them so you can feel a little more connected to that organization, so that if you do decide I'm going to apply and I'm going to interview, you now have this drive, this extra connection that makes you want to be a part of this organization. I was always just very extremely honest about what the challenges may be, what opportunities are available here, and helping them to see who they could really be within this space, within this organization, and how their presence could impact the students and classrooms that they serve. That honesty allows them to decide where they can fit in. If you try to hide things and they find out later, they end up resenting the whole thing. They might leave earlier than necessary. Again, just being honest as an organization, this is just where we are. Nobody's perfect. But if you are really passionate about this, maybe this is something you can bring to the organization.
I think it always has to start with, what are you doing that's different? What environment are you creating, even if it doesn't look like the ideal state yet? So if you're talking to a candidate and you have business resource groups, if you have mentorship programs, you can advertise those things, talk about those things and how that might be beneficial to candidates. But I absolutely agree with Erica. You don't want to lie about the current state or try and sugarcoat it, because it will become very apparent very quickly. So doing that work internally too, to make sure that you're creating that environment is key.